That's a savanna and that's a forest. We've converted destroyed forests that became a savanna back into the forest it used to be. And regenerated a rainforest whereby we went from 11 species to 256 species. 11 plant species in the savanna, 256 species. I promote the concept of regenerating biodiversity. We have, unfortunately, too many people who think we only have to protect biodiversity. Now, protection is great, but when you protect, you lose. If your mindset is not protection, but your mindset is regeneration, well, then you have the chance to regenerate. And while regenerating, you're protecting. And that kind of an attitude is what we need. We need the kind of thing that we can work with nature to generate more of that nature. We've planted those trees and we tap them. And out of this resin, we extract fuel. We extract fuel to put into the motorbike, to put into the tractors. We use the fuel tapped from the tree. We call that tap energy. We're tapping the trees. And the trees is a pine tree that permits biodiversity to regrow. We don't do monocultures. I've learned my lessons. Here is the factory. We make it ourselves. We eliminate fossil fuels, but we don't eliminate the cars. We eliminate the fossil fuel, and we don't say, now we have to go electric vehicle. We eliminate the fossil fuel, and we say we don't have to go biodiesel, because that biodiesel, again, comes from the palm oil. So we don't want to do, we learn not to fall in the trap, and since we know how to make all the connections, we plant forests. The forest generates water. The trees that we plant to generate fuel. That gives us cash as an income. Generates jobs. Generates biodiversity. Provides capital to the local population. This is what I call economic development. Maybe we can call this sustainable economic development. Because the more forests we plant, the more fuel we have. Taiwan, you depend for what, 99% on foreign energy supply? Don't you feel a little bit nervous about that? Don't you think there are other ways to do this than only import? So when we have examples where we succeeded in having 8,000 hectares of savanna converted to a rainforest, what more can we do and where? Taiwan sometimes struggles to keep its political connections alive overseas. Plant some trees, will you? Plant a few trees. Not to plant the trees, but to generate the fuel. And this is not something to save the world. This is actually to be very strategic in your operations. The land we purchased in 1984 for $1 per hectare. 25 years later, it's worth $3,000 a hectare. We beat Microsoft in capital gains. Now that's interesting. Because in capital gains, beating Microsoft, which is one of the most admired companies in the world, by planting trees, securing you have water and you have renewable fuel, is not a bad idea. JP Morgan gave me these numbers, not me. JP Morgan. And of course then we have the critics who say, but Microsoft has been paying dividends. And I said, yes, and I've been giving water for free. And I think the dividend of water for free in a community is high value. I would like to see Microsoft's headquarters without water for 1 week. We have set up a system that will generate water forever. And what kind of a dividend is that? And this is the kind of thinking we want to instill with the kids. This is in Colombia. So what we want to do is they see that the sky is not even the limit. We can go beyond the sky. And this is so important that we can put in perspective that these projects are real projects, but we can even get into discussion about returns and money. And so what we're actually doing is, now my fables allow me to start debating economic models, economic development models. And you bet you I'm a capitalist. You bet you I'm for open market, because I refuse all these subsidies. But we do this in an open market with investments. And the reason why we're successful is because we respond to the needs of the people. And actually, any of you studied marketing? Philip Kotler, you may remember. Philip Kotler, the guru of marketing, says a good marketeer responds to what the market needs. Now, the market needs water and food and energy. Why don't you supply it in a competitive way with what you have? And these are the models we put in practice. The fable that I wrote about that is forest drinking water. In my fable, I don't insist on the fact that it generates so much fuel. I insist on the fact that as soon as you have a forest, you remember, Michael, your question about the black and white? What happens in a forest? You generate the green. And the green, compared to the light savanna color, is darker. So it's hotter. As a result, when the clouds come over, boom, it rains. And so we do the same thing. We create temperature differentials. And by creating these temperature differentials, we succeed in generating rainfall. And by having the rainfall over our forest, we have more water in the forest. And more water in the forest means more percolation. That means we have drinking water. Subsurface. Why? Because we planted the forest. That's the story. And before, when there was no forest, then you have very specific bacteria, very acid bacteria. And if you're drinking water that is highly acidic, then you will have diarrhea. And as a result, we're tackling health thanks to the planting of the trees, which gives me drinking water forever. Now, when kids get into that kind of mode, see, every story ends with a very simple message: it only has just begun. You know, most fables, they end, and they were ever happily married thereafter and had many children. Wow, boring. That's all. No. It only has just begun. We just started. Now, this project I've been involved in 27 years. And that is why I feel at some point in time, this fable is where the children open their horizons. Because if that's possible, they want to go.